Hey everyone, welcome back. This is our third video in a 5-part series about connecting ideas. If we've never studied before together, my name is Sharon and I'm so happy that you're here today. So today we're going to be looking at complex sentences. What does that mean? So remember, I started with this foundational block of English. The smallest unit of English that makes sense is an independent clause. We've already seen that when we put two independent clauses together, it makes a compound sentence. Well, what happens if we put a dependent clause with an independent clause? It makes a complex sentence. That's what happens. All right, so again, a complex sentence is not a long sentence. It may be long, but it could also be short. And it's not always a sentence that has a word like before or after. Some students look for certain words and they determine that those words mean that it's complex, and that's not always true. What a complex sentence is a sentence that has an independent clause and a dependent clause. Now the dependent clause, it can come before or it can come after. And there are different punctuation rules depending on where it comes. A complex sentence has a subordinating conjunction at the beginning of the dependent clause. It doesn't have to come at the beginning of the sentence, but it has to come at the beginning of a dependent clause, and we'll talk about that. Like I said before, the dependent clause can come first or it can come second. And my short notation for that is dependent clause, comma, comma, independent clause, or independent clause, no comma, dependent clause. All right, so subordinating conjunctions, here are some examples. These are very basic ones. I'm not going to give you all of them, but these are very, very common. So we have because, when, while, after, before, since, if, although, and even though. Okay. When we see these words, what we should think is, I see a dependent clause. Okay. So here are some examples. I locked the door after I came home. So here is our independent clause. And here's our dependent. Now notice they're the same number of words. You have 4 words here and you have 4 words here. So you can't always look for which one has more words. They might have the same or you might have fewer in the independent clause. How we know that this is the dependent clause is we have after. After comes at the beginning of a dependent clause. We could also start with the dependent clause. If we start with the dependent clause and then we have the independent afterward, then we're going to have the comma between. There is no comma here, okay? And so visually, again, we can have this or we can have this. With this one, we're going to have a comma. All right, so you tell me, is this a complex sentence? When I play soccer, I always wear my lucky socks. Well, let's take a look. I see when. All right, so that's a subordinating conjunction. I see subject and verb. I've got my comma, and I've got another subject and verb. So yes, this is a complex sentence. Although the weather was awful, we still had class. Let's look. We have although is our subordinating conjunction. The weather, subject, verb was, comma, right? Subject and verb. So this also is a complex sentence. What about this one? He cleaned the house while I was at work. What a nice guy. We have subject, verb, Here's our subordinating conjunction, subject and verb. We can have this too. Remember, we can have it at the end. So yes. What about this one? Because I asked you a question. Let's take a look. Well, here's our subordinating conjunction. I have a subject and a verb. I even have an object here, right? Oh, but I don't have another independent clause. So no, this is actually called a fragment. And in our next video, we'll talk about how to avoid fragments. Before Tuesday, you need to complete your homework. Oh, I see the word before. So I'm going to circle it. Subject, I don't have a verb. Now here is an interesting situation. This is actually not a subject. And this is actually not a subordinating conjunction. This, before in this sentence, is being a preposition. And Tuesday is acting as a noun. Okay? Then we have our subject here. So no, this is not a complex sentence. How about this one? I see after, but I was tricked in the last one. I don't see a verb here. So this is actually a preposition, and this is a noun. So no, this is not a complex sentence. All right, here's a last one. Is it correct? I love my mother because she is so wonderful. A lot of us understand that statement. Is it correct? Well, I have a subject, and I have a verb. I even have an object. I see my subordinating conjunction. I have a subject and a verb. The problem is here, okay? Because we have independent clause, dependent clause, we do not have a comma between those two. We only have a comma when the dependent clause comes first. So I could write comma. We could write that and it would be fine. All right, that's enough for now. In our next video, we'll start looking at how do we avoid fragments, run-ons, and comma splices. I'll see you then.